On February 10th, CPS Energy officials informed the public that an Arctic air mass headed to our area could impact the utility's infrastructure as well as the electric grid for a majority of Texas. But with the price of natural gas increasing but not yet spiking, CPS records show that same day its units of gas purchased actually went down. Multiple energy experts who spoke both on and off the record with the defenders said CPS was caught exposed, both in its long-term projections for how much fuel could be needed to heat homes and provide power to its plants, and in its energy preparations days ahead of the storm.
Well, certainly there are a number of utilities and retail electricity providers that were not appropriately hedged.
Ed Hurst is the energy fellow at the University of Houston. He says you can add CPS to the list of energy companies that failed to undertake appropriate risk management.
Oh, absolutely. They were caught flat-footed. I'm sure they didn't expect the market to go this way, but it did. Were there protections that could have ameliorated this exposure? Probably so.
A lawsuit filed by CPS in March that accuses two natural gas providers of price gouging during the freeze shows the utility was forced to sign contracts for fuel that was marked up more than 192 times what the price had been just a few days earlier. CPS officials as recently as April said their total bills from the storm could top $1.035 billion. That figure includes the hundreds of millions of dollars spent on natural gas, as well as energy purchased through ERCOT. A source with one of the nearly 20 gas suppliers being sued by CPS told the defenders the total owed by the utility is actually much higher, since CPS also faces significant interest payments on what they owe due to non-payment. Two of those suppliers sit in court filings that CPS is trying to divert attention from its own poor risk management. Some legal experts have called the lawsuits a long shot. In May, CPS Energy CEO and President Paula Gold-Williams defended the lawsuits, saying the goal is to prevent those bills from being passed on to customers.
We want them to know the fight is for them. It is absolutely for them. This is a pass-through cost, but we think in principle, no San Antonian and no Texan should be required to pay price gouging.
CPS has now spent over $2.5 million in outside fees for storm-related attorney and consultant work, a cost Gold-Williams stands by.
And the cost of lawyers to help us work through these things and consultants is very much a minimal part of a $1 billion bill. We're not talking that. We're trying to save the $1 billion. So you have to have people help you fight. And even though it may be a difficult court suit, just because it is, it doesn't mean we shouldn't fight.
The $1 billion bill, a nightmare scenario for the finances of a power company intensified by Texas's over-reliance on natural gas. That's according to Arash Asrari, assistant professor of engineering at Southern Illinois University Carbondale.
The reserve power is expensive, specifically when we rely on the natural gas.
Compare CPS's dilemma to what happened to the city of Austin's public utility. According to early estimates, Austin Energy actually made more than $50 million during the storm by selling excess power. Gold-Williams attributed the discrepancy of hundreds of millions of bucks to CPS's size in Austin's smaller customer base.
Our community consumes much more in terms of the commodity of fuel as well as the power.
Lots of people made money. Lots of people lost money. I'm afraid the consumer, also known as the taxpayer in this state, is on the hook for billions of dollars.
Emails, which were handed over following a records request by the defenders, show that while their customers were suffering in the cold, some CPS officials were worried about something else: polishing and improving the image of their president and CEO.
It was going to be used for firewood.
On the third day of February's bitter freeze, still without power, Raul Villarreal took his wooden bed frame and chopped it to pieces so he could heat his home and keep his children and mother safe.
That was the last resort.
Internal CPS Energy records from that same day, February 17th, show that Gold-Williams and members of her senior leadership team were busy drafting a message in support of, well, her, touting her zest for the job and leadership. The letter was to be signed by board chair Dr. Willis Mackey and then released to the public. And who was driving this publicity bonanza? Turns out, Gold Williams herself, according to notes of a morning meeting compiled by her chief of staff. Just over 2 hours later, the utility's director of government relations forwarded a draft of the letter, warning that it would be criticized by critics, but then said regardless of that, he supported the idea to send out a statement. Just before noon, Gold Williams forwarded a version that included her comments, the body of the note describing her as, quote, passionate about serving our community, as are her hardworking leadership team members. A half hour later, CPS's Senior Director of Corporate Communications, Melissa Sorolla, included an edit, and then a half hour after that, now past 1 p.m., Chief of Staff Loretta Kerner added a change. Officials confirmed the letter was never sent, telling us they instead relied on other methods during the storm, like media briefings to talk to the public. But the issue isn't that a letter in support of Gold Williams was written, it's the timing of when they decided to write it, according to CPS Energy trustee and San Antonio Mayor Ron Nirenberg.
We'll acknowledge that there was probably morale issues happening that this was supposed to buoy, but it's certainly not the right time to be doing that.
Even though the message states Mackey and his fellow board members are very supportive of Gold Williams and her team, Nirenberg confirms he was not consulted on the drafting of it, which took place while hundreds of thousands of CPS customers were without power.
Our focus as a city and my focus as mayor during a crisis is to zero in on the work that needs to get done. We can argue about the formalities later. We need to focus on getting the job done and the problem solved.
During an interview with KSAT's Steve Spriester in May, Gold Williams downplayed the PR draft.
Was it a mistake?
Was it a mistake to draft something? We
Or
draft.
to talk about the PR in a time when people don't have power?
Well, look, I think the important thing is what we know is you have to always communicate to your customers. And the comment was, are you communicating enough? And what the comment needed to be that this team was continuing to fight to make sure that we were creating stabilization. We draft a lot of things trying to make sure that we're communicating. I don't think it's ever a mistake to try to communicate.
The thousands of pages of CPS emails also reveal the utility's at times disjointed messaging. A CPS vice president forwarding an email February 15th from someone not associated with the company that recommended they post photos of people enjoying the once-in-a-blue-moon snow to refocus the emotion. Just days after spokesman Rudy Garza proclaimed it's game time and called CPS the best utility in the country, its chief administrative officer told him he needed to be more specific about how long the outages could last when addressing the public, writing, quote,